anywhere that has a real thick dead butt, try and get that cleaned out as well as possible before we go out. But if at all possible, target kind of your best growing grass, because at the moment it's going to give you your best return versus maybe some of those older swards.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Chocolate Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you the latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode we catch up with grassland advisor Nikki Kennedy to discuss grassland management for March. Nikki shares an update on grass covers around the country and outlines some of the key grazing targets for that first rotation. She also highlights the importance of grouping up ewes effectively to achieve those graze outs. We finish up discussing fertiliser and lime application strategies for the spring. This was recorded last week prior to the return of the wet conditions. We hear now from Nikki.
Covers at the moment on dry stock farms, we're looking pretty good. Now there's obviously variation across that, but the average covers there that we're getting from farms across the country is we've got a cover of about 780 kilos of dry matter, which is a great place to be on a dry stock farm at this time of the year. Growth was really varied over the winter, and I suppose there's a number of factors around that: weather conditions, what your closing cover was, a few different things, how far into the winter you grazed. But growth this week and for the weeks coming is looking good. We've got it predicted in the mid-20s, so even people that are a bit behind, they should see growth picking up, and recovery on any grazed paddocks they do have is looking really good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's really kicked on again. I know Harmlock, probably them waterlogged conditions, Nikki, had an impact on farms as well there in February. Didn't get that boost maybe they should have got.
Yeah, definitely. But hopefully, and touch wood now, we've got a good forecast for the coming sort of 10 days in most parts of the country. And so we should see a real turn in those ground conditions and the growing conditions that go along with that. Soil temperatures should start rising a whole lot better now that there's not as much water on the ground.
Look, if we talk a little bit about grazing management for a moment, and I suppose this is important and it really does set us up for the year, but our focus does need to be on getting that right at the moment. In terms of pre-grazing covers, Nikki, and our residuals, what are our targets?
Yeah, I guess at this time of the year on sheep farms, we have to keep the grass in mind and we have to keep the animals in mind. So a lot of that comes back to the autumn, and I guess we can't change that now, but it's something to be mindful of maybe this spring when we are turning sheep out. If we find when we don't have those good covers, and we're sort of talking 1,200 plus to get a good cover for ewes and lambs to go into, if those sorts of covers aren't in your fields that say have good shelter from a prevailing wind, good access from the yard, the places that you can actually put ewes and lambs into, it might be one to think about in the autumn to sort of prioritise having those closed up. But yeah, we're looking at those covers, and we're looking to graze them down nice and cleanly for this time of the year. But in saying that, we don't want to keep them in low covers for a long time. So we want to get them grazed out and moved on back into fresh grass. So down to that sort of 4 centimetres and move them on, give them fresh grass again.
Nikki, probably the two challenges there, maybe for those that lambed a bit earlier, late February, early March, was the conditions. One, were challenging to get grazed out without soiling it. That has improved. Probably the other big issue though, Nikki, and you touched on spending too much time grazing them out, getting a sizable group together to do that in a timely fashion. That's another challenge at the moment we need to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there's always a challenge of ewes with young lambs, but look, I suppose once the ewes and lambs are at a point where mismothering is not going to be an issue, and they've sort of got over that initial change to the system of going out into a big paddock, like if we can get them turned out into those fields that are, say, lamb friendly or fresh lamb friendly, and once we're given them a couple of days, like we're able to move them on then, and having the farm set up that we can move animals easily, sort of from an infrastructure point of view and a labour point of view, to move them on and start grouping them up so that we can actually move into a somewhat normal grazing pattern kind of as early as we can. That will just allow those graze outs to be hit and the grass to be protected.
I suppose that's the dual benefit there, Nikki. We're getting through the paddocks in terms of grazing them out and getting that graze out a bit quicker, so less time at low cover. But you're also getting that regrowth benefit.
Yeah, definitely. It's the double whammy. It's the less a ewe has to work to get her fill, she'll milk better. The lambs will be better. And there'll be more grass for her when she comes back around, say in a month's time, back to that same field. That ground will grow more grass when it's been left to rest and had adequate rest time.
Look, we're just talking about that first rotation. Maybe in terms of kind of a target they could work towards, how much of that should be grazing through, we'd say, for an early March lambing flock? Where are we on that in terms of going too fast or going too slow? And I'm aware there is big variation out there on farms.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of these things where there's a big variation between stocking rates and time of lambing and how quickly you lamb. If you lamb all at the start versus it's sort of a more spread lambing rate. I guess something to look at is at this time of the year with the growth rates. I know in the main part of the grazing season we talk about coming back to a field in 21 days or 3 weeks. At this time of the year, you're probably looking at close to 5 or 6 weeks. Um, so it's really working back from that you have enough grass that you're not going to have to come back to fields for about 5 weeks.
So we're looking kind of for that early March lambing flock, we're looking at starting our second rotation in mid-April. I suppose that throws up the question, then, Nikki, if we're going through it too quick in the case of bare fields and the stone line of grass grows grass, you're chasing your tail. Probably no harm to maybe just assess if we're rapidly going through covers that we actually might need to put in a bit of supplement for some farms, and then others is just keeping on track and keeping things moving.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where kind of this grassland management comes in and being aware of looking and seeing how much grass do I have ahead of them? What's my grass doing that I have grazed? Is it recovering well? If you are measuring grass, there's kind of a number there of a cover of 500 kilos per hectare. Like dropping below that, it not only means that you're going into low covers and ewes are probably struggling to hit their intakes, it means that the whole farm cover is dropped that low that your grass growth, that grass grows grass, is really being hampered. And not only are you missing out now with intakes from the ewes, you're really actually you're hitting your April grass and your May grass because you don't have that same grass growing ability. And then, like you said, there's some supplementation in that situation is going to be needed. And what I'd say is better to do it early and let the grass come back and grow ahead. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation of stunted grass growth, and you're going to have to supplement anyway, but probably for a longer period of time. And when ewes are trying to hit peak milk at the moment, yeah, like you probably have less ewes out as well if you're a March lambing flock. So supplementing now and just slowing them down on that rotation will save you in April and May when grass really should be taking off. But if our covers drop too low, it won't.
And again, look, that's only for farms that are chasing their tail for grass. For those that have good supply, that should really kick on now with the kind of growth rates you mentioned earlier. So it's only for those farms that may be struggling a bit more. Look, we've touched on the graze outs, we've touched on the management. Probably the most challenging aspect at the moment, Nikki, is fertiliser, and probably something else that left us a bit more challenging this year is it was late going out and late being bought on a lot of farms. Can't do much about the price at the moment, unfortunately, but there's still a need to put some out on it.
Yeah, as you touched on there, unfortunately, we're in a bit of a tricky situation with the fertilizer. I suppose that situation was tricky to start with, just from conditions and even people that were wanting to get out. They just didn't have the conditions to get out early. And now I suppose there's an added complication of there can be difficulty sourcing it, and prices they can be hard got. Even if you can get onto your merchant and it's available, it can be hard to sort of lock in a price. But I suppose just from sort of the technical side of it, if your stocking rate is sort of anywhere from medium to high, like you're really going to need to look at putting out fertilizer. Otherwise, we're going to catch up. Demand is going to catch up to growth before we hit that magic day. So getting some level of fertilizer out, and that's going to depend on if you're highly stocked, what level of grass you already have, and your fertilizer allowances.
And look, at the thing is, moving on, it's going to hit either performance again, or you're going to have to put in supplement to cover it. In terms of getting the most out of it, Nikki, where do you target first, and kind of what rates should we be looking at the moment for those moderate to high stock farms?
Yeah, as with anything, and whenever we're going out with fertilizer, we're trying to get the best return. I suppose if there's the basics of you have to go firstly where you can travel. There'll be lots of places where parts of the farm will be travelable and other parts won't be, and everyone will know that for themselves. But I suppose where we really get our best returns is from if you have any newer ryegrasses versus older swards, they'll have a much better response. Any grass that's there's a good cover, you'd want at least, I'd say, put a number on it, about 500 of a cover to be going out on, and anywhere that has a real thick dead butt, you try and get that cleaned out as well as possible before we go out. But yeah, if at all possible, target kind of your best growing grass, because at the moment, I know that sounds a bit silly, but at the moment, like, it's going to give you your best return versus maybe some of those older swards. As for what rates we're going for, we're not talking anything massive, probably anywhere from about 15 to 20 or 25 units. So depending on what you can get, and I know products at the moment are a bit unpredictable, but 15 units, that's working out at just over half a bag of can or a third of a bag of protected urea. Up to your sort of 20 or 23 units is kind of 2/3 of a bag of can or half a bag of protected urea per acre.
It's just going to help kick that on. Look, I suppose, Nikki, everything always comes into focus when prices like this go up, and probably the one aspect that's forgotten most times is our soil pH, getting all them other things right. Planning ahead, it's something that should be considered definitely on the cards for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the pH is a massive dictator of what grass will grow, and that sort of comes down to how well the grass utilizes nutrients. I've sort of touched on it before in other podcasts, but if your pH is wrong, your P's and K's are sort of locked up from a plant point of view, and the nitrogen that we put on is not being used very efficiently. So correcting the pH is probably always the first port of call. Now, looking at from sort of this time of the year, we can actually spread lime any time of the year on grazing ground in particular. We only need a few weeks from spreading it to grazing it. As long as there's a bit of rain coming in there, and in the current climate, we can almost guarantee that in a 3-week period,
Yep.
especially this time of the year, we're right to spread. In terms of silage ground, we probably have got a bit late for spreading lime for this year, but it's definitely something to keep in the back of your mind. If you do have silage ground there that is really low in pH, after your last cut of silage is off this year, correcting that silage will be the biggest step in improving the quantity of silage you'll take off that ground next year.
Again, just something to focus on. Look, Nikki, great having you on, and we'll chat to you again next month.
Thanks very much, Kieran.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. I have included a link in the show notes to the Grassland newsletter where you can get updates from that programme. That's it for me. Don't forget to follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.